welcome to All the Grief, a weekly podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I'm Andrea Mathern.
We are two friends, a therapist and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief.
Hi, everyone. This week we'll be talking about 4,000 weeks, and we'll explain what that means in just a moment. But Rebecca, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm kind of liking this, that it's just like overcast and a little moody today. And yeah, I'm doing pretty well overall. What about you? How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. I will try and appreciate the break from the intense heat. I'm a sun worshiper, so I'm just like, when are those clouds going to get eaten away? But it does allow me to be able to walk my dog in the middle of the day instead of at 7 in the morning or 7 at night. So that gives me a lot more options. So I'll lean into that. But yeah, otherwise I'm good. Looking forward to the weekend. We have a family baby shower and my sister's in town, which is always absolute joy for me. I love her so much. Yeah, and she lives in Minneapolis. So whenever she's in town, I'm very happy.
That's sweet. I do want to say you could not appreciate the cloudiness of today. You do not have to, just because we can be in different spaces about it. Isn't that life? Yeah.
I do like that I will not have to water my plants or my garden today. And I didn't yesterday. So that I do like, because I feel terrible wasting water, but I like to have living plants in my backyard.
I know. That's real. Yes. There's always some doorway into slightly appreciating a cloudy day.
That's right.
Yeah, so let's talk about this topic of 4,000 weeks and what that means. So that is the title of a book that has a subtitle of Time Management for Mortals. And sort of the
Which
premise.
I love that.
Yes, me too. It's written by Oliver Burkeman, and he spent a lot of time actually studying productivity. So it was sort of this workplace, how to be more efficient, productive. He spent a lot of his life focusing on that, and then stumbled into this concept. I don't quite remember how, but where he learned that the average human lifespan was 4,000 weeks. And it just shifted everything about productivity that he had been working on, and really recognizing how he describes the finitude of our lives, that they're finite and that we're mortals, and we keep treating time like this thing to be managed. And so how does that relate to grief? In reading the book, it was one of those sort of mind-blowing pieces to me to consider that I do not have 4,000 weeks in front of me at this point. Right. And that's actually a 76-year long life. So I mean, I'm surprised that that's the average. The takeaway for me, and it was something that I really just chewed on for weeks, and I think spoke to Andrea about it, but was not shy to find audiences with anyone who was next to me, like, oh my gosh, how many weeks do you think we have on this planet, right? But it was something that really helped me recognize the thing about my own relationship to time and being mortal. And I think that it's always hard to remember that you're mortal. And one of the things he says in the book is, and that's not even guaranteed. Like, we're not even guaranteed the 4,000 weeks. And it was something that really struck me, that was put me a little bit more in the present moment, put me more in a current week, and was different questions that he asked around knowing essentially that time is so precious. What would you choose to do with the weeks that you have remaining? Really looking at your to-do list and saying, is this worth that part of these amount of weeks that I might have that I'm not even guaranteed? And it helped me find a present moment orientation for myself and with my mortality that was sort of like, yeah, what's essential? And so I shared it with you. Did you read it? I don't know.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so things came up for you too. So share what your impression.
Yeah. So I loved it as a planner. So he, like you said, he was like this time management consultant or whatever that's called when you do that. And he loved finding time management tools. And I don't love time management tools, but I love planning. I just love planning. It eases my anxiety. And I think one of the things that tied this to one of my realizations from the grief of losing my father was what you were just touching on, that nothing's promised. We're in control of so very little. of what's happening and that we can't count on anything. So, with my dad, he was literally supposed to come home the next day. And he died all alone in the hospital. The literal tomorrow wasn't promised for us. And so I think in mourning my dad's death, like there was this real eye opening of like, you just have no idea. And
Mhm.
am I spending my time focused on the right things?
Mhm.
And so reading this, that was really one of the messages throughout the book. Even if we live that long, and some of us will live longer, but he talks about like even the oldest recorded woman, that woman in France who was like 120, that's still like 6,700 weeks or something. And she lived to be 120.
Right.
You know? So not many of us are going to do that. So, even at that isn't that many. And we all have those moments where it's like, I swear it was just Tuesday yesterday. Like, how
Mhm.
can it be Tuesday again? And so that really resonated a lot with me. So control was one, and the sort of finiteness, the limited. He talks a lot about like accepting limitations.
Mhm.
And I think as someone who, before my dad passed away, I like did it all and like, in quotations, because I thought I was doing it all. But in reality, like I would come through something really intense. Like I got my PhD while I was working full time, and I had twin boys in the middle of it. And on the cover, I was like doing it all. Somehow I was finishing my PhD and my babies were healthy, happy little boys, and I was performing very well at work. But then when I came out on the other side, I was like, oh my God, I haven't attended to my mental or physical health in 6 years.
Mm.
And in the final year of my PhD was when my dad died. So it was just like this moment of you do have to give up something. Like you can't do everything. And in the book, he says something about the way I read it was like, that's what makes our choices so important and so precious is that we choose them, right?
Mm.
And so that really helped me think about, yes, most of us have to work to pay for our lives, but I had a tendency to overwork.
Mhm.
Oh, sure, I'll take on that extra project. Oh, sure. I was an overperformer. And he talks a lot about the research that overperformers get more work because why would your supervisor give it to the underperformer?
Right.
you know?
It's so true.
Yeah. So I would get more work and I would do more work. And then it would be, oh, I'm just going to be 30 minutes late, or I'm going to be an hour late, or I'm going to work on a weekend, or I'm going to do this one night activity. And in the realization when my dad died and that realization of choice, I was like, I don't want to choose this over my boys,
Mhm.
including my husband, my mom, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, myself. I don't want to choose this over myself. And so I started to make these really big changes. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah, I think you point to a few important things, which I was sharing with another friend. I saw something this week that said the only people who are going to remember how late you worked are your children.
Totally.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that hurts.
Yeah.
but I'm not a late worker. I just think about it for all the people who are really striving and to get that sort of recognition from their boss and kind of recognizing like it's not that memorable. And usually for a lot of people who do work a lot, they're on salary and they're not making extra for taking
Right.
away more time from themselves. And so that hardworking ethos is really counter to like being present and living in balance. And I feel like when grief entered my life, it entered fast and hard. Like it was this series of
Mhm.
back-to-back events. When I lost my dad, I could kind of tell myself, I mean, it's sort of shocking to me as I approach
Right.
50. He was only 53.
Right.
But at the time I was 32 and that seemed really far away. And he just, that way that some people just age and look older. And
Mhm.
he just seemed like he's old and he was a smoker and he had a lot of heart stuff. And so maybe even though it was shocking in the moment that it happened, it's still, I felt some internal protection, like, I'll be fine. You know, even if this is my genetics, I don't smoke and I am taking good care of myself. And then
Mm-hmm.
within months, I got cancer. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I won't be fine. And I sort of woke up to my own mortality. So, like, losing my dad woke me up to, oh, right, we're mortal. This is going to happen. And I'm going to experience this multiple times in my life.
Right.
Yeah, this is life. This is part of it, is also that you lose people. And then with my own potentially life threatening disease, it's like, oh, I'm mortal
Right.
and I could die really young. And then whenever I was finished with chemo and thought we figured something out about life and everything's okay, then my sister's baby was stillborn. And I remember being on the floor crying and thinking, life has never been shorter. It's never been shorter, you know, that he didn't even take a breath. And so just really having those events kind of hit me back to back, it did put me in this place where I started to think about what matters, and that I'm not guaranteed anything, and who knows what's going to happen, and how do I make choices? And like you're talking about, how do you balance? I mean, we do need to make money because we live in
Mm-hmm.
capitalist society. So how do you balance work? What do you prioritize? And that's sort of where I've come to. It's like, how do I do just enough work and just prioritize? I better have time to be with my daughter. I better have time to be with the people I love. That feels really important. And yeah, it just shifted everything.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think one thing I would love to sort of touch on is how, because I have recommended this book to people who did not find it as exciting as you or
Oh,
I might have found it. And they were like, wow, that's super
oh,
depressing. And I actually, you know, came out on the other side feeling really low. I don't want to know that, you know, and I honor that
sure.
that can be like a lot. And I think that sometimes there's this way that, like, really thinking about being mortal or how you want to spend your life, you can start to perseverate on the shortness of life. It could increase anxiety or it can
Sure.
make it harder. So yeah, I'm just curious, being someone, when we both have sort of self-proclaimed our, well, you have less anxiety than me, but you had more anxiety on the other side of your dad's death. And the question I have for you is like, and how did this book support lessening that anxiety, or did it increase it? Like what was the experience?
I I think what it did was gave some truth to my anxiety, because I think part of the anxiety that then provoked a lot of big actions in my life. I left a job I had had for 10 years that was a little high prestige and I think was going to continue to be like a career escalating job. I just did all kinds of crazy things and I'm happy with every single one of them. But they were terrifying and probably things that would have given my dad so much anxiety, which I thought about a lot every time I made these big decisions. But I think reading the book, it was, why I did those things was because I didn't want to be that article in the New York Times that was like 10 things I wish I would have known before I was on my deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
And always, 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 it's like number three, number two, number one, work less, hang out with your family and your kids more and your friends.
Yeah.
Like always,
Yeah.
always the lesson is as people look back at their life, I wish I would have been in relationship with others and the world more and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so reading this book, what it actually did was be like, you're anxious about that because that's a reality. Your anxiety that you're going to miss your boys, whatever is their next big milestone, jumping off a ramp on their bike or whatever. I don't know. I don't know.
I'd like to not be present for that one, but sure.
I know. I know. But my anxiety about missing that is real because I'm not guaranteed anything other than this moment right now. So
Mhm.
it was interesting for me. It was like, holy shit, 4,000 weeks and I'm 43. So yikes, I am already through 2,000 of those weeks. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was like you said, thinking about how I can continually rearrange my life so that I get out of it what I want. And if I died tomorrow, today was a fucking good day, and
Mhm.
not good in that I'm like happy all the time. Like I fucking cried on my Peloton this morning
Yes,
thinking about my
good.
dad, like I mean, not
Yeah.
that every moment's good, but that I really was thoughtful about how I spent each day. And so that actually for me gave me some like, oh, this isn't just one of those random anxieties
Hmm.
that I also possess. This is one that it's because that could be. And there's not a lot I can do about it. Like, I take care of the things I can. I eat
Hmm.
well, and I come from a family, like both my parents were diabetic. 3 of 4 of my grandparents were diabetic. Like, it's like you're just waiting every year for the doctor to be like, all right, your time's up.
Mm.
So I do things to like take care of my health. And, now I do a lot better taking care of my mental and emotional health as well. So I do things like in the long run to take care of myself, but I also am really trying to think about, how did I spend today? How am I gonna spend today? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's relatable from the perspective of what are the things that I have on my list today? What are the things that I'm doing today? Are they all essential? Would it be okay to not do some of them if I can have more time with my family? Or and then going to bed with the way you phrased it was like, oh, today was a good day, and then kind of had your caveat. I mean, I think the word that I love is like full. Like, was it a full day?
Mm,
Was it like, but fullness in the sense of like rich, I guess. And so feeling that fullness and richness of, yeah, I cried today. I had a really
mm.
good conversation with this friend. I had a moment where I felt sad and I just journaled about it and honored it for that moment. And we laughed so hard at something silly that happened. It's a different way of relating to sort of a gratitude practice, which I think a lot of people do. And I love recognizing, especially if someone's kind of prone to notice what's going wrong, to start to
Mm.
recognize, oh, these are the things that went well, but almost appreciating the fullness of a life
I love that.
in a
I
day.
love that. One of the notes that I took in the book, so he was writing about how people in ancient times related, or basically didn't relate to time in the same way that we did.
Hmm.
There weren't to-do lists. It was just like, if you were a farmer, your work was never done. So you didn't like end the day like, oh shit, I didn't get through my to-do list, because like
Yes.
there's no possibility that you would ever do that. Then he kind of talks about Greek and Roman philosophers in talking about fulfillment, this idea of fulfillment, and that in part of our being able to be fulfilled, like, we have to accept limits, and that the only people that are limitless are gods. And so that our job here as humans on earth is to be wholeheartedly human,
Mm.
like to experience the full breadth of what it is to be human. So when you said that, that really hit home as one of the things that he said. And I love that, because, yeah, a full day. I love that because, I'm pretty expressive in my emotions anyway. But in a day, I
Mm.
literally can go from like my heart being cracked open in the morning to like laughing hysterically, like, to just being in awe and love with my family at dinner tonight. Like, those things will all happen in one day.
Hmm.
And I'll probably be fucking pissed off about something today as well.
Yeah.
Like these goddamn clouds or
Right,
whatever.
right. Totally. But it's just, it's like sometimes anger for me is also delightful because it's like there's something, the irreverence, the truth of it, the ways that it can, especially when we've talked about like how much we both share a love of curse words. And it's like,
Yes.
but a fullness of a life. And I remember the part you're talking about, and I kind of loved when he said it wasn't like you were going to milk the cow and like, I'm going to milk a month's worth of milk out of this cow. You didn't think like that. It was just like a farming life that you had a certain level of tasks that you did, a task oriented life, make sure the work is done. But there was such a richness and more time for connection and more time for sort of the things that we call leisure now that should just be
A
essential.
part of life. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And he also talked a lot about, as we have gotten more efficient, in everything, like industrialization and mechanism of things. And it reminded me of this saying of, when it's like, oh, I'm going to go this way, so I save 10 minutes. It's like, what are you saving those 10 minutes for? Like, when in your,
Mm-hmm.
like, we save this time. I think we think there's like this bank. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
saved 10 minutes and then I have this bank, so I'll use it this weekend. But that's like
Yeah.
not how time, that's just not how time works. It's constantly moving. And the best that we can do is live in the very moment. And like, my husband, y'all went to the same school that is outside of a field of how I live and grew up, like my culture. Like, it's, there's a lot around mindfulness and being present and meditation. And when we first got together, I would just be like, I don't even understand the words coming out of your mouth. well, sometimes. But reading this book, it really helped me to think about what that means, like being present in the moment. Like, it's like, I am not even going to remember I saved those 10 minutes in my commute by taking a shortcut, like later
Mhm.
on when I'm desperate for time for something else. And like, I don't get to transfer those 10 minutes over to something else. And so, how am I just enjoying that moment? And there was another quote from the book where he talks a lot about like the experiences, but not to also become like obsessed with experiences, right? Like the
Right.
creation of a bucket list, like the idea is like, oh, I'm going to like experience all these things and then my life will be complete and fulfilled.
Yeah.
But the more you see of the world, the more there is to see of the world. Like, it's just infinite the number of experiences that we
Yes.
can see and experience. And so he talks a lot about wonder.
Mm.
And he has this thing here that says, the world is bursting with wonder, and yet it's the rare productivity guru who seems to have considered the possibility that the ultimate point of all our frenetic doing might be to experience more of that wonder. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. And anybody who has littles in their lives gets a like re-injection of what it means to just be in wonder of awe and awe of the world.
Mhm.
And so I think about that a lot. And I think like whether we're travelers or we're not travelers, whether we're inside our house or stepping out for a walk, there's so much to be in awe and wonder and curiosity about. And yeah, that sat with me.
Yeah, I love the topic of wonder. I mean, I have this conversation frequently, but so when I got my cancer diagnosis, I mean, that was one of those moments, more than meditation, more than anything that ever happened in our grad school program, I was instantly transported to the present moment.
Mm,
And it was absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, it was a place of wonder more than it was a place of fear or anger or anything
mhm,
emotional that might have come up. I was just in wonder and I felt like a baby. And I imagine because I was like, I remember I looked at my hands. I can remember the sun kind of coming through this skylight and I was watching the sun on my hands and I was like, oh, I'm right here right now and
mm,
I have cancer in my body. That's what's true. It was like this sense of I know something. A lot of us don't know what's happening inside of our bodies. I know a thing about my body. I've probably been walking around with it for months, but now I know that's what's happening. And I know that I'm going to do treatment for this. And it's that disruption in, like you were talking about, having plans. The only plan is focusing on health. But it was such a fascinating moment. And I really, I love that in children. And I think that they are just
mm.
in this constant state of wonder, like, oh, look at this leaf. And you're like, that's the best leaf. And yeah, it really, there's something to that. You can recognize the finiteness of your life and you actually have a choice. So I love the idea of choice of how you relate to that. So you can perseverate on like, oh God, anything could happen at any time. I have to be so safe
Right.
and I'm going to make my world smaller and smaller. Or you can choose to look at it like, oh, it's all so precious and I don't know when it's going to end. And I think I mentioned in the last episode I'm reading David Kessler's Finding Meaning, and he talks about I don't care if it's a few days or 90 years, it never feels long enough.
Mm.
Our lives never feel long enough, and so it's just like relating to even like it'll never feel like I had enough time because immortal is for the realm of the gods or
Mhm. Or
vampires, right?
vampires,
It's
yeah.
like and like vampires seem pretty miserable. They're like,
They
just
totally
spend life on
do.
Earth for like thousands of years, and all I do is drink blood.
They
And
only go out at night. Like, God, I would suffer. I would not get to see the sunlight. I would suffer. Yeah.
yeah, and so I kind of want to ask this juicy question that I didn't set you up for, so you can take a minute to think about it. But when I start to lean into these places, I also think about. But I've had these moments where I thought like this might be the end. And you kind of do like this life review, like what's the takeaway here? But
Hmm.
I feel
Yeah.
like, I know that you've done some work around like do not resuscitate. You've had those conversations, but like how do you feel about your life? And if like there wasn't a tomorrow, like what do you hope people know about your life?
I love that question. So I was going through our safe, like looking for our marriage license or the boys' birth certificate or something. And I came across this letter that was a will and testament, but like not put through any legalese. And it was from one of Bryce's like an old dear friend of his, like since middle school or high school or whatever. And it was his will and testament. And I read it. I probably shouldn't have, but I'm a nosy little bitch. And so I did. I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
I won't say his name. He has many friends from high school. So all of them can be like, shit, did I send Bryce my will? And it was really beautiful because it was like, here's where I want shit to go and whatever. And then it was like this love letter to his wife. And I wrote one to Bryce and to my boys because what I hope, like if I die tomorrow, really what I would want people, I'm going to totally cry, but I
Mhm.
would want people to say, like, I was a good mom,
Mhm.
that I was really loving, that I was a good partner to my husband, that I was a good friend, that I was a good daughter. And I mean, in the way that, like, I love people bigly. I mean,
Yes, you
I just
do.
like, my heart is like very open, very tender heart. It's kind of why I have a hard time sometimes being in public spaces or like going to parties and things because people are very like, I don't know that you have this, but I'm almost certain without putting words in your mouth that you are like this. Like, because you're a really good listener, because you're so engaged, because you are genuinely curious and interested in people, like any people, that they are just drawn to that. So, like, I remember once we were coming home from the airport in a Lyft and, it was probably like fucking midnight. We were tired. It was a long trip. And I just can't help but chat with all my Lyft drivers. And Bryce is just like, who is also a very loving, tender, generous person, is like so fucking annoyed. Like, he's like, why are you talking to this person so much? And like, why do you need to make best friends with every single person? It's like what he loves about me at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but maybe doesn't love so much about me at 6 o'clock in the morning. But I genuinely like love to hear about people. But when I get in
Mm.
some of those big spaces, it just like kind of drains everything out of me. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go to my cocoon and I
Mhm.
need to not see anybody for a couple days so I could like refill up my reservoirs. But I hope that people just our shirt logo when we get merch for our first time, that just says like give love or share love. I can't remember what it was, but like I hope that, like, I've really been focused, I think the last probably 6 months with real intention on love, just wanting to focus on embodying love. And I think sometimes it's easiest and hardest with those closest to us, like
Mm.
my 5-year-olds. Like, it's so easy to like love them so much. Or my dog, I'm like, an obsessive dog mom, like that. I'm trying to think about, like, how do I expand that? So that's what I hope. I don't give a shit if somebody's like, oh, she did this really kick-ass project at the museum, or she did this great fucking
Mm.
presentation, or she really facilitated that retreat really great. Like,
Right.
I want them to be like,
Totally.
I loved being in her presence because
Mm.
she really cared about me. Because I
Mhm.
do, I care about people in my presence. Sometimes so much that it is exhausting for me, but
Yeah.
I never regret it. So
Yeah.
I love that question. And it is something I have been thinking about for about the last year. And just being intentional about what I want to be in the world for myself and for others.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want you to know I absolutely will remember you for that if you go
Oh,
first. I mean, yeah, you summed up exactly who you are, and so you're doing it. And yeah, I love that you wrote these love letters because I think there's a book I was reading that I got from the library accidentally, but it's like one of those things where you're like, there are no accidents. And the title of it is Leaving a Trace. And
mm,
I think she bought a house and happened to find in the attic or something a diary of someone who had lived there before.
mm.
And I think that maybe this person wrote a diary the way you do when you're young and you're like, nothing happened today. And then it's just like
Yeah.
June 2nd, whatever. She's like, I'm confident something happened, right? But then that she has this whole sense of who this person was, and then looks at her diaries, and starts to look at even just famous artists and writers who kept personal journals, and even how a grocery list is like interesting.
Mm.
And it really made me think about like, yeah, these little things that we leave behind that become, part of the story of who we are. And I know I have journal pages. I think at this point, my journals, they're too many for anyone to try to read, but at least it gives someone something to tether themselves to.
Yeah.
If I die, they'll be like, I could read one page a day and I won't get through this.
Mm.
But that I know in there, I talk a lot about my love for my daughter and that she would
Mhm.
find that and that I would love to leave her a letter. But it's one of those things that, I don't know, there's something really sweet about making an effort for people to have something to connect with you when you're gone. So I think that
Yeah.
that's where a letter and a will that is actually a love letter, that would be more important to me. It's like, I leave you my snarky sense of humor. Like, I would want to do things like that more than like,
I leave you
and
my permission to say the F word whenever you want, my boys.
exactly. You just rock that word. I mean, I remember, and I know we both listened to Anderson Cooper's interview with Stephen Colbert and how he talked about, and I'll probably get the details of it wrong, but the gist of when his grandmother dies, there were like numbers you could pull. So the family would pull a number and then they get to go choose something from that pile and they have to say why they chose it and
Mm.
what it reminded them of. And I'm like, yeah, those things that feel so meaningful where instead of, maybe going through my mom's like massive collections of all the things that she collects in life and storage, but just saying like, let's each go choose 10 things and then talk about why we chose what we chose and like letting those things sort of be this continued connection. So where I was kind of coming from when I brought up the part about feeling like, oh, I'm going to die. When I got in this wreck, it was basically like I'm sliding on ice and this car in front of me is not moving. And there's a point where there's no way that I'm stopping.
Mm.
And so I just had this thought, I might die now. And I just got into this really peaceful sort of an acceptance place, which is not, I think, where everyone would go. But I had this happen a few times. And when it happens, I always go to a peaceful place. And so I told my best friend, I just want you to know whenever I die, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be peaceful because there are events that are like, oh
Mm.
crap, this shouldn't be happening. This is terrible. But like, I'm hoping I don't. But if I did, that it's like, okay, this might be happening now. And that I did feel a lot of sadness for my daughter, that my hope is that I wouldn't die while she's little.
Yeah.
And I think it's always going to be
Yeah.
painful. I think that she and I are so connected, whichever one of us goes first. It's just going to be
Yeah.
hard. And there's not a way around that. That I felt, at peace. And I feel like that feels important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the letters was definitely stemmed from not getting to say goodbye to my
Mm-hmm.
dad. He had been in the hospital, it was COVID, so we weren't allowed to see him. The way the hospital bed was arranged, it wasn't really easy for him to kind of like get his phone without asking a nurse. So, we would get kind of randomly be able to talk to him, sometimes text. But, I was so used to talking to my dad every day. It was such a different time. And then he was gone. And, you kind of hear how the passing went. And, you just wonder, like, super selfish, but like, did you think about me? Did you think
Mm.
about me when you passed? And I think, like, the idea of the letters is like, I want them to know, like, I think about them all the time. Like, when
Yeah.
I think about my life, like, I think about these fucking amazing little boys and my incredible husband. We've created like this beautiful partnership and we've created these humans like that we created so painfully intentionally. Like,
Yeah.
it was not easy. Every step of the way was really intentional, and it's going to be painful when I go, whether I go tomorrow or I go
Yeah. Right.
50 years from now. My grandma's 96. Who knows? My grandparents have a tendency to live into their 90s. And so it's going to be painful. And what I want them to know, like you said, like that you were at peace, I want them to know that they were like in my fucking heart and mind
All the time.
every second, including the very last one. Cause I don't know, that feels really tender. So I can totally understand that, wanting to, in that time of pretty much nothing can comfort you, just the
Mm-hmm.
little knowledge that you were at peace when you
Yeah.
passed, for Talia, whenever that comes, that she knows, like, you
Yeah.
weren't scared or you weren't in pain or you weren't angry about death coming for you, that you were at peace, I think could offer something. So I totally understand that.
And a sense that I have too is like a certain fullness in my life. And I think that that also feels really important to
Mm.
communicate.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because, we can feel like, oh, I didn't see the Taj Mahal, or I didn't,
Totally.
there's so much we could do. And like you said, it's infinite. But I feel like there's something that also feel that washes over me that feels like it was a really good life. Like it was really, I feel complete. If I have to say goodbye, I actually would feel complete. And I'm not saying this is everyone's experience or should be. This is just what I know to be true about me, and would be the sort of thing that I would want people to say, we actually know this, that she felt like at any point
Yeah.
her life was really full and complete. Like I have loved fully. I echo a lot of the sentiment that you have because it's just like I love bigly. There's so much love in my heart, and I really do love getting to know people. I don't have a lot of tolerance for small talk, but I can find a way with most
Yeah.
people to really get through that and be like, okay, tell me the real thing that's
Yeah.
happening in your world. But yeah, just to have that sense too that, it was complete. Of course, if I die and my daughter's young, of course there would be like all this stuff I would miss in her life that would be sad and that would be hard for her to go through without me. And sort of knowing that from my loss with my dad, like he never knew my daughter.
Yeah.
And also I never knew his mom. There's
Yeah.
these things that are like, oh, that's a shame. But I don't know. For me, it's something kind of more, this is life. Like at some point, we do say goodbye, whether we
Yeah.
wanted to or not, right? And so just to know, like, yeah, I got a lot of experiences in. And for me, experiences are emotional. I'm like, I felt rage. I
Yeah.
felt sadness. I felt, it was the fullness of being human. And I think that that's how I kind of related to healing from cancer was there was this day where I was running and I was like, I mean, I want to write my doctor and be like, hey, I was outside today running and the lighting was beautiful and all the, and I just want to say like, thank you. This
Mm.
was like a bonus day. And and then it's like, oh, I had my daughter. I wanted to write my doctor, my
Totally.
oncologist again, and just be like, I have a daughter now, that there are these things that, the doctor treats you and then you're gone. And it's like, oh, but this, thank you. Cause there was like, I got more time. Maybe I wouldn't have had these weeks in front of me that I have gotten.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. And I'll just say, I totally think you should write your doctor. So, and why I say it is, so my boys were born, they were premature, and they were 32 weekers, as they say, in the NICU. And they were in the NICU for a month. And luckily, my boys were super healthy, even though they came 2 months early. They were really healthy. All they had to do was learn how to eat. And now they're going into kindergarten next year, and one of their very best friends, her mom is a doctor in the NICU where they were born, where they spent the first 2 months of their life. And um and she replaced the doctor that took care of my boys, so she knows a lot of the same nurses or whatever. And so one day she asked me, like, Andrea, can I tell people that I know your boys, and can I tell them how big and beautiful and strong they are? Because some days in the NICU, when we're taking care of really little ones that we worry will not get better, or a mom's really freaked out because she's going to have to give birth to her babies 2 months early, like, I just want to tell them, like, not just the platitude of everything could turn out okay. She's a doctor, so she never says anything will. But
yeah.
I know twins who were in this NICU who were born early, and no one would know. No one would know. They're the tallest kids in the class. And so I'm always like, yes, tell
Mm-hmm.
anybody that you need to, because
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in there. So I just think of your oncologist and probably the array of experiences that they have supporting people through cancer. And yeah, right
Yeah,
on.
I
Yeah.
will. I will. Thank you for that nudge. Totally. Yeah, I'm noticing our
Yeah.
time. So I'm wanting to just see if there's anything unsaid that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, I think I love when you give me book recommendations, and we'll have more going out. And of course, we'll link to this one if you didn't catch it. But there were so many nuggets in here. There was this beautiful thing that I wanted just to share. We recoil from the notion that this is it, that this life, with all its flaws and inescapable vulnerabilities, its extreme brevity, and our limited influence over how it unfolds, is the only one we'll get a shot at. I just like, I read that and I was like, to embrace that, to embrace its brevity, to embrace, which the brevity part isn't the hard part for me. The part that's hard is like the limited control. That's my piece to wrestle with. And that's, I think, when I left my job and have sort of turned on the person that I was building for 35 years, just decided I'm going to be somebody different. I think I've had to embrace that idea of flow and unpredictability and getting more used to it. So it's a beautiful book, and maybe it will terrify you and maybe it will bring you some light bulb moments. And I don't know, but I would recommend giving it a shot. So thank you for it. I love it.
You're welcome. Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that you actually enjoyed it because I do feel a little bad for the people who are like, wow, that was dark. And I'm like, it wasn't dark, but we all get to have different experiences. I just
Totally.
wasn't expecting that. But one of the chapter that I really love in the book is there's a chapter called Cosmic Insignificance Therapy to really kind of also recognize you don't have to do anything really significant in your life and that your life is significant and meaningful because of what you've chosen to do in this moment.
Mm.
Like your world is your world and that there's something really significant and the impact that you have there. So it was like this, even the things that we think are significant that we can track. Oh, Steve Jobs made the iPhone. Like there's a point where that's not going to be significant to anyone, or like Earth's just not going to exist anymore. Like there, we can't
Yeah.
be significant forever. Everything falls away. And so it's just like really recognizing you matter to someone, your life matters here, and you don't have to do anything amazing with it. And that I think that that's a lot of people's mismanagement of time, feeling like they need to do something really important.
Yeah, and I think that's so beautiful and it exists on so many levels, right? Like our comparison with celebrity culture and like this idea of what we should be, what we should be doing, who should we look like. Then
Yeah.
there's like our sort of capitalist culture of, succeeding professionally and tying ourselves to our professional identities, like that defines who we are. And like an MD is more important than somebody who comes and organizes your closet. It's like,
Yeah.
God bless that person and please come to my house.
Yes.
I just think there's so many lessons in that. I agree.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, as we close, how are you touching your grief?
Yeah. I mean, today my grief is just reaching out and touching me. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I get on my little bike or I go for a run or every once in a while I'll go swimming or something. But today I was on my bike and it was like a Broadway musical themed ride. So like nothing,
Okay.
nothing. My dad did not like musicals that I remember. But there was this song with Zach Brown Band and Hugh Jackman from The
Okay.
Greatest Showman, which I have not seen. I meant to see when I was in New York last time, mostly just because Hugh Jackman is real pretty to look at. And I don't even know. I'm going to have to go back and like listen to the song. But I mean, suddenly, like, I could picture my dad's hands. It was just overwhelming. And
Mm.
I'm like, I just let myself feel the feelings and let the grief just wash over me. And lots and lots and lots of tears came and there was some vocalization of that sadness that came out of my body and it was totally unexpected. I was trying to think, is today something, but it's not his birthday, it's not Father's Day, it's nothing. It's just I was sad today. So
Mm.
today grief reached out and touched me and I'm okay with that. So I'm just gonna think about him today.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for naming just that way that we don't always have to have an active relationship with grief because it also has one with us, right? And so it's
Totally does. How about you?
for me today. I mean, when I was on my run, I was also watching the birds, and there was a song that came on. So it's interesting, like music kind of like evoking a thing in both of us today. But the band Milky Chance, there's a song called Fado that is like a mournful tune. I think in Portuguese language, it's a word used to describe a mournful tune. I wouldn't say that this
Mm.
song is necessarily sad, but in the song, the lyrics, I think the refrain or the chorus, I'm so bad at something.
It's in the
It's in
song.
the song. These are some of the words. But it was, what if the birds don't know how to sing anymore? And what if it hurts you? And so it hurts you. And this is Fado.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that would be so sad, and just really feeling into probably a little bit more just like climate grief and nature grief
Mm.
in that the way that the song kind of just taps into that. And then I just am like, oh, I just like want to hear the birds sing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, well, I hope you
Yeah.
hear the birds sing today.
I know. I'll go check in on my bird friends. All right, Andrea.
All right.
Love you.
Love you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at All the Grief Pod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.